Hello, my name is John Vance. I'm the press attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Prague in the Czech Republic. I'm here with Larry Sitney, who's a veteran of the United States Army who served in Czechoslovakia during the Second World War. We're having this interview in May of 2010, and this is the time of year that most of the events in the war happened in the former Czechoslovakia, and Larry has agreed to come by and tell us a little bit about the history, what it was like to be here at that time, and what he remembers from his service in Czechoslovakia. So Larry, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
For coming to join us.
Actually, I wanted to get in the joint, see what it looked like, but can you edit? Can you edit that?
So we wanted to hear a little bit about your perspective on what you recall from 1945.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about when you arrived and what your role was.
We arrived in France probably about the 10th of September, and the division was assigned to Brittany around cities of Lorient and Saint-Nazaire because the job had changed. I think the Army originally was going to clear out all the submarine bases that the Germans had in France, and they took really heavy casualties at Brest, and apparently the plan changed, and instead of trying to take those towns, all they were going to do is keep the Germans in. So when we got there, our job was simply to make sure the Germans remained in their area and didn't get homesick and try to rejoin the Army. And I think, in a way I'm joking about, because I'm sure most of the Germans were smart enough to know they had a good deal being confined there, because they probably were going to be alive when the war was over. But when the bulge started, I think there was a genuine fear on the part of the American Army that some of the die-hard Germans might try to rejoin the Germans, but never saw that. And then at the end of December, we were removed from France and sent to the Battle of the Bulge. And for a long, long time, we thought that had happened because in America, I'll get the number right now. Well, I won't get the number. There was an American division, and they had one of their troop ships was sunk in the English Channel on Christmas Eve, and they lost about 800 men. And that was a big secret at the time. It was a 66th Division, I remember. And we thought we were replaced because the 66th was in no shape to go into combat. It wasn't just a little piece of the division that the men were from. You know, they were from all kinds of units in the division, and it really disassembled that division. So anyhow, that's why we thought we were. Years later, it turns out that there are records which indicate that we would have been replaced even if nothing had happened to the 6th. We would have been replaced by the 66th even if nothing had happened. All right, so we left France either the 31st of January, December, or the 1st of January, and my artillery battalion and one of our infantry regiments, which formed that combination of an artillery battalion and an infantry regiment is called a regimental combat team. And our regimental combat team initially was assigned as a mobile reserve for the 28th Division, which had been pretty badly chopped up in the Bulge. So for our first week, and I always thought this was in Germany, but it turns out it was in France, every day we drove from one place to another place, and each day it was different. And so maybe that's where the Army thought the Germans might go after the 28th if they did anything or not. All I know is it was cold, and we were in the back of trucks, and we just moved, and I never knew where we were at that time, but I went to the National Archives at one time to find out, and we were places like Verdun, almost a whole series of towns which had been where the fighting had occurred in World War I, Sedan, but I never knew it at the time. So first week we got cold, we didn't do any useful functions except burn gas. And then, I think with 2 or 3 days to travel there, plus the week we spent driving all over, it was probably about the 10th of January when our regimental combat team actually got into combat positions in Germany. And our division was in something called the Saar-Moselle Triangle. If you know geography, the Moselle kind of goes like this, and the Saar's like that. In between the German border, French-German border, and the Moselle River, and where the two rivers join, that's where our division was. And we started down very close to where the French-German border was. And for the next 2 months, we had very intense fighting, working our way north towards Trier and west to the Saar River, and then across the Saar River to the Rhine. And in that 2-month period, which I personally consider our war, because that's the only real hard fighting we did, we lost about 1,100 men and had maybe 8,000 or 10,000 wounded.
Put that in perspective for us. How many people were in the division then? I'm
guessing somewhere between 13,000 and 14,000.
So you're talking about a more than 50% casualty rate.
Yeah, 10% mortality and 50% casualty.
So by the time that your unit had gotten to Czechoslovakia, you were quite seasoned.
Yeah, Patton didn't think very much of us in the beginning, because the first month we had more non-combat casualties than combat casualties, because there was an awful lot of trench foot and frozen feet, and that was really indirectly Patton's fault, because we never got the right equipment for the conditions. And then maybe a month later, a piece of footgear called a shoe pack, which is basically a rubber boot that laces and maybe about the height of overshoes or up here. The infantry got those things, and that kind of put an end to frozen feet and trench foot. And things were so bad, Patton was considering relieving our commanding general over the fact that we had too many non-combat casualties. Anyhow, we started almost immediately. We were up against the first of 2 Siegfried lines, which in the American Army called the Siegfried Switch, and it ran from the Saar River to the Moselle River, a couple miles inside of Germany. So the division captured a few little villages that were inside the Siegfried Switch, and they penetrated the Siegfried Switch, and by 21st or 22nd of February, they, with the help of the 10th Armored Division, which came in real late, they cleared out the triangle. And then a day or two later, they got a bridgehead. They got 3 bridgeheads across the Saar River. And part of the problem was the Germans' own fault, because Hitler had this no retreat rule, and when the German generals were asking to be able to allow to withdraw to get across the Saar where they'd have better position, they got turned down. So they lost a lot of troops because they weren't allowed to retreat. And although the fighting was difficult, let's say we got 3 bridgeheads across the Saar within a couple of days, and I didn't expect to have a German history, but I have a friend who was in the infantry, and he'd come in as a replacement, and he was waiting at one of the bridgeheads to cross when Patton came down with a bunch of correspondents expecting to see a bridge crossing. And the crossing didn't happen,